The front door of the house was unlocked. When I pushed it open, the dead silence hit me harder than any bullet. Violet's favorite stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the hallway floor, completely torn down the middle. My daughter was gone, but the absolute nightmare was the person sitting completely calm in the living room. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment on your city or country. I had spent the last 9 months halfway across the world, surviving a covert deployment in the worst conditions imaginable. My entire special ops team relied on me to track high-value targets through the darkest, most hostile environments on Earth. I was trained to see what others missed, to hunt shadows, and to read the silence. But the only thing that kept my heart beating, the only thing that kept my mind sharp in the dirt and the blood was the thought of coming home to my 7-year-old daughter, Violet. My marriage to Kendra had fractured 2 years ago. We shared custody, but the arrangement was always strained. Kendra cared more about maintaining her high society lifestyle and hiding her secret, crushing financial debts, than she did about being a mother. Still, I never thought she was capable of something truly evil. I was a fool. When I stepped into the living room, my heavy duffel bag slipped from my shoulder and hit the floor with a loud thud. The house felt freezing, the heating was completely off, but that was not what made my blood run cold. It was Kendra. She was sitting gracefully on the white leather sofa, her legs crossed. She was not crying, she was not pacing the floor in a panic, she was not on the phone with the police. She was holding a crystal glass of expensive red wine. Her eyes were glued to the bright screen of her phone, her thumb casually scrolling as if it were just another lazy Sunday afternoon. "Where is she?" I asked. My voice was low, carrying the quiet, dangerous edge of a man who knew exactly how to interrogate hostile prisoners. Kendra did not jump. She did not even look up immediately. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, swallowed, and finally met my eyes. Her expression was completely blank. It was the chilling face of a sociopath who had successfully closed a lucrative business deal. "Hunter," she said, her tone utterly flat. "You are home early. Where is Violet?" I closed the distance between us. My combat boots left faint dust tracks on her pristine rug. "She is no longer here," Kendra said simply. She set her phone face down on the glass coffee table. "She is with people who can actually provide for her future. A collective. They understand the true meaning of guidance." I froze. The air in the room seemed to completely evaporate. I looked back out toward the hallway at the violently torn stuffed rabbit. "What did you do, Kendra? What do you mean, a collective?" She let out an annoyed sigh, as if I were a child asking a stupid question. "I made a choice, Hunter. Raising a child is expensive. It is exhausting. You are always gone playing soldier in the dirt, and I am left to deal with the harsh reality of life here. I found a group. They take in children. They groom them for higher purposes. In exchange, they relieved me of certain massive financial burdens." My heart hammered aggressively against my ribs. It took every ounce of discipline drilled into me by the military not to shatter the glass table right in front of her. She sold our daughter. She had literally traded our 7-year-old little girl to a dangerous underground cult to pay off her own selfish debts. The betrayal was so deep, so unnatural, it made my stomach turn. "Did you call the police?" I asked, testing her. I needed to know how deep this nightmare went. Kendra let out a short, mocking laugh. "Why would I do that? I am her primary legal guardian when you are deployed. I told the local precinct that I enrolled Violet in a highly exclusive private boarding school out of state. I showed them the forged enrollment papers the collective provided. They believed it instantly. As far as the law is concerned, Violet is getting a world-class education." I stared at the woman I once loved, searching for any trace of a human soul. There was nothing, just a hollow, greedy shell. I had hunted the worst predators in the world, men who did unspeakable things in the dark. But this woman sitting comfortably in my living room was worse than all of them combined. She had weaponized the legal system against her own flesh and blood. "Who took her?" My voice dropped to a whisper. It was the exact voice I used right before an ambush. "I am not telling you that." Kendra sneered, picking up her wineglass again. "And if you try to make a scene, I will tell the police you broke into my house and threatened me. You will be locked up, and you will never see her again. Just walk away, Hunter. Start a new life. It is done." I did not scream. I did not yell. Emotion and panic are the absolute enemies of a tracker. Instead, I let a terrifying, unnatural calm wash over me. The kind of calm that happens right before the safety of a rifle is clicked off. I turned away from her and walked out of the living room, ignoring her threats. I walked up the hardwood stairs, each step heavy with a sickening dread. I pushed open the door to Violet's bedroom. The pink walls were exactly as I remembered, but the room had been aggressively sterilized. The bed was stripped entirely bare. Her clothes were gone. All her toys were missing. Kendra was incredibly careless. She was deeply arrogant. She truly thought a mother's lie was the perfect crime. But people always leave a trace. Every predator leaves a footprint. I knelt down on the carpet and looked under the small wooden desk in the corner, right where Violet used to hide her crayons when she was scared. There, scratched frantically and deeply into the wooden baseboard, was a symbol I had never seen before. A jagged circle with 3 sharp lines cutting through it. Violet had left me a sign. I traced the deep scratches with my thumb. A cold promise locked itself into my mind. I was not going to call the police. I was not going to hire a lawyer to fight Kendra in court. The law had blindfolds and endless loopholes, but I did not. I was going to use every single lethal skill the military had ever taught me. I was going to find this invisible trail, and when I found the monsters who took my little girl, I was not going to arrest them. I stood up, gripping the torn rabbit in my hand, and looked back at the empty house that had become a tomb. Kendra thought she had won, but she had no idea what kind of predator she had just invited into her life. What did that jagged symbol mean, and how far into the dark was I willing to go to get my daughter back? I stayed in Violet's room until the light outside the windows went from pale gray to full black. I did not move fast. Fast gets you sloppy. Sloppy gets people killed. I started where she would have started if she had been scared and trying to leave me a trail. The scratch symbol on the baseboard was not random. The lines were too steady in some places, too panicked in others. Violet had not been drawing. She had been trying to remember, trying to copy something she had seen. I took out my phone and photographed it from 3 angles. Then I scanned the floor, the desk, the window latch, the closet track, and the heating vent. Kids notice details adults dismiss. Good trackers do the opposite. We survive by respecting small things. The window was locked from the inside. That mattered. No one had taken her through the window. They had walked her out through the front of the house like they belonged there. I checked the carpet next. Near the foot of the bed, buried in the fibers, I found a tiny white bead the size of a fingernail, not plastic, bone, maybe handmade. There was a faint reddish stain in the groove around it. Paint or dried clay. I slipped it into my pocket. Then I picked up the torn rabbit again. At first glance, it looked like a child's toy that got caught in an ugly fight, but when I turned it over, I saw the rip was too clean in one section. Violet had not torn it. Someone had opened it and stuffed it back badly. Inside the torn seam pressed deep into the cotton filling was a small folded square of paper. My hands almost failed me right there. I unfolded it carefully. There was no sentence, no note, just 3 things drawn in crayon: the jagged circle, a row of pine trees, and a black shape beside them that looked like a church with no cross. My chest tightened. Violet knew I would understand pictures better than panicked words. She had my brain. Even at 7, she watched, remembered, and adapted. I had always called her my little shadow. Kendra used to laugh when I said it. Nothing about this felt funny now. I searched the rest of the room. In the closet, I found empty hangers pushed all the way to one side. In the bathroom trash, under tissues and cotton pads, I found the foil top from a liquid sleep aid. Child dosage, cherry flavor, recently used. I stared at it for a long second. They had drugged her. That was the moment something inside me stopped shaking and turned hard. Downstairs. I could hear Kendra moving around the kitchen, humming under her breath like the world had not ended. I went to the top of the stairs and listened. A drawer opened. Glass touched marble. Then her voice dropped low. "Yes," she said. "He found the room." Silence. "No, he does not know where. He knows nothing." Another silence, longer this time. Her voice sharpened. "I said I handled it, Dominic." I went still, so now I had a name. I crouched by the stair rail and angled my phone between the spindles just enough to catch audio. Not perfect, but enough. Kendra exhaled hard, then moved them sooner. If he starts asking questions, I am not taking the fall for this alone. That was all I needed. I stepped back before the floorboard under my boot could betray me. "Dominic, move them. This was not some soft, harmless spiritual retreat. This was organized, mobile, disciplined. I headed for the mudroom and searched Kendra's coat pockets. Receipts, lip gloss, a valet ticket, nothing useful. In her handbag, I found 2 credit cards near maxed out, a bottle of prescription anxiety pills, and a folded brochure with no company name on the front. Just the same jagged circle, embossed in silver. Inside, the language was dressed up and poisonous. Private renewal, youth mentorship, family release through guided separation, invitation only. At the bottom was an address for a wellness gathering held 2 months earlier at a place called Hollow Pine Retreat. Pine trees. I looked back at Violet's drawing. My pulse steadied. This was the first real line I could pull. I slipped out of the house without telling Kendra where I was going. She called after me from the kitchen, asking if I was finally ready to act sane. I ignored her. The retreat sat 2 hours north, tucked behind state land and private timber. I drove with the windows down and the brochure on the passenger seat, forcing myself to think instead of rage. On deployment, I used to train new guys on target psychology. People who believe they are untouchable always make the same mistake. They hide in patterns, rituals, favorite roads, trusted middlemen. They start thinking repetition is safety. Cults do that more than anyone. Halfway there, I pulled into a gas station and searched the symbol through every public database and image archive I could access from my phone. Most of it was junk. Amateur occult forums, old church records, conspiracy threads. But buried in a Scan County complaint from 4 years earlier, I found a grainy photo attached to a zoning dispute, a wooden sign near a fenced property line. Carved into it was the same jagged circle. The listed owner was not Dominic. It was a shell nonprofit called the Lantern Path Foundation. No website, no active tax filings, just a mailing address and a legal representative in the city. That meant money, layers, protection. I drove the rest of the way after dark. Hollow Pine Retreat was not marked on the highway. I would have missed the turn if I had not been looking for fresh gravel and tire wear. The access road was narrow, wet, and lined with trees packed so tightly their branches locked overhead. The deeper I went, the more the world seemed to disappear behind me. Then I saw it, a wooden archway half hidden by brush. No lights, no welcome sign, just that symbol carved into the left post, and dark red wax dripping from the grooves like old blood. I killed the headlights and rolled the truck forward on idle until I could see past the gate. There were 3 buildings in the clearing, 1 long cabin, 1 chapel-shaped structure with no cross, and 1 smaller shed near the tree line. A fire burned low and a pit at the center. Figures moved around it in pale clothing, slow and silent. I counted adults first, 6 outside, maybe more inside. Then I saw something small pass between 2 of them, a child. I leaned forward over the wheel, barely breathing. The child turned just enough for the firelight to catch the side of her face. It was not Violet, but tied around that little girl's wrist was Violet's friendship bracelet. Purple thread, 1 crooked white bead, the one she made at summer camp and refused to take off for 3 weeks because she said it made her brave. My daughter had been here, maybe she still was. Then the chapel door opened and a man stepped into the firelight wearing a dark coat and a calm smile that made my skin crawl before I even saw his face clearly. The people near the fire lowered their heads when he passed, and the little girl wearing Violet's bracelet looked terrified of him. The man in the dark coat stood near the fire, raising his hands slowly. The pale figures around him stopped moving entirely. Even from this distance, I could feel the strange, suffocating gravity he held over them. It was exactly like watching a predator secure its kill. I rolled down the truck window just an inch, letting the cold air hit my face to keep my focus razor sharp. He spoke, but the crackle of the fire and the wind through the pines buried his words. I didn't need to hear him to understand what I was looking at. The way they leaned toward him, desperate for his approval, told me everything. This man was not just a leader, he was the center of their twisted universe. Could this be Dominic? I picked up my binoculars from the passenger seat and brought them to my eyes, adjusting the focus dial with my thumb. The man was older, maybe late 50s, with sharp features in a relaxed, arrogant posture. He wasn't armed, at least not openly, but he moved with the dangerous confidence of someone who knew he controlled everyone in the clearing. Then he reached out and gently touched the shoulder of the little girl wearing Violet's bracelet. The girl flinched. It was a tiny movement, almost invisible if you weren't trained to look for fear. But I saw it. And I saw the way the man smiled when she did. My knuckles turned white against the steering wheel. I wanted to put the truck in gear, smash through the wooden gate, and break him apart with my bare hands. I wanted to tear this place to the ground until someone gave me Violet, but I didn't. Rage is a loud, stupid weapon. If I moved now, I would be blind. I didn't know how many people were inside those cabins. I didn't know if they were armed. If I attacked and Violet was not here, they would scatter into the wind. They would bury her deeper in the system, and I would never find her again. I forced myself to breathe, slow, steady intakes of air, the same way I did before a high-risk extraction. I needed intel, I needed leverage, and right now, my only solid lead back in the real world was the local police force Kendra had so easily manipulated. I lowered the binoculars and backed the truck down the dark access road, careful not to crush any dry branches. By the time I reached the county precinct the next morning, the sky was the color of bruised iron. The station was quiet, smelling of cheap coffee and old floor wax. The desk sergeant barely looked up when I walked in, but an older detective standing near the bulletin board stopped pinning up a flyer and stared at me. "Can I help you?" he asked. His name tag read Julian. "I need to report a missing child," I said, keeping my voice flat and controlled. "My daughter, Violet." Detective Julian's eyes flickered with recognition. "Violet, your wife came in 3 days ago. She showed us the enrollment papers for that private academy upstate. We already cleared it." "Those papers are forged," I said, pulling out the brochure I found in Kendra's bag and sliding it across the desk. "She sold her to a cult." Julian looked at the brochure, then back at me. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Mr. Hunter, right? Your wife was very clear about the custody arrangement. She had primary authority while you were deployed. She made a schooling decision. Look at the brochure, Julian. Do those people look like educators to you?" He didn't touch it. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I am going to tell you something off the record, because you look like a guy who understands how things work. That group, the Lantern Path, we know about them." I went perfectly still. "Then why haven't you raided them?" "Because we can't," Julian said, genuine frustration leaking into his voice. "They are protected, heavily protected. They have lawyers that make our city attorney sweat. Every time we try to get a warrant for the Hollow Pine property, a judge strikes it down. They claim religious exemption, private mentorship, you name it. And the worst part, the parents sign the kids over willingly, legally, just like your wife did." He tapped his finger hard against the desk. "It is a wall, Hunter, a massive legal wall. If I go out there without ironclad proof of abuse, they will sue this department into the ground, and the kids will disappear across state lines before the ink is dry on the lawsuit. So, you just let them take kids. We need a crack in the armor," Julian said quietly. "We need someone inside to talk, or we need proof of a financial transaction. If we can prove they are buying kids, human trafficking charges stick. But they are smart. They use shell companies. Cash drops crypto. We can never trace the money." A cold realization settled over me. The law was not going to help me. The system was designed to protect the predators, hiding them behind paperwork and religious loopholes. If I waited for a judge to give me permission to save my daughter, I would be waiting forever. "I understand," I said, picking up the brochure and putting it back in my pocket. "Julian, watch me carefully. Don't do anything stupid, Hunter. If you cross the line, I will have to arrest you. And you can't help your daughter from a cell. I won't do anything stupid," I promised. And it was the truth. What I was about to do was not stupid. It was precise. I walked out of the precinct and sat in my truck. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I had secretly captured of Kendra the night before. If he starts asking questions, I am not taking the fall for this alone. I said I handled it, Dominic. Julian needed a financial transaction. He needed proof of human trafficking. Kendra didn't just give Violet away. She was drowning in debt. She had traded our daughter for a massive payout. And if Dominic was moving people soon, that meant the final transaction had not fully cleared yet. There would be a drop-off, a physical meeting where the debt was finally erased. I started the truck. I didn't need a warrant to follow my ex-wife. For the next 48 hours, I became a ghost. I slept in my truck down the street from Kendra's house. I watched her leave for her expensive yoga classes, watched her meet friends for lunch as if her child wasn't missing, and watched her return home every night. On the evening of the third day, the pattern broke. Kendra left the house at 11 p.m. She wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. She was wearing a dark coat and kept looking nervously over her shoulder. She got into her car and drove toward the edge of the city, heading out toward the abandoned industrial park near the old rail yards. I followed her, keeping my headlights off whenever I could, tracking the faint red glow of her taillights through the industrial shadows. She pulled into a massive empty warehouse lot. I parked 3 streets away and moved on foot, slipping through a rusted chain-link fence. I climbed up the side of a decaying shipping container, getting a perfect vantage point over the meeting spot. A black luxury SUV was already waiting. Kendra stepped out of her car, clutching her purse tightly to her chest. The passenger door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out. It was not Dominic. It was the man from the fire. The man who had smiled at the little girl with Violet's bracelet. He handed Kendra a thick, heavy manila envelope. She opened it quickly, thumbing through the stacks of cash inside. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the greedy relief wash over her face. The transaction was happening right now, but as the man turned to get back into the SUV, he stopped. He looked directly toward the shipping container where I was hiding. He smiled, that same calm, terrifying smile, and raised his hand, pointing right at me. He had known I was there the entire time. What did I just walked into? The spotlight hit me before I could even blink. The man by the SUV didn't just point at me, he signaled. A blinding beam of light erupted from the darkness behind my shipping container, followed by the deafening roar of a heavy engine. They had played me. I wasn't the hunter tonight. Kendra was the bait and I was the prey. I dropped blindly from the rusted roof. A split second later, a heavy pickup truck slammed into the side of the container, buckling the thick metal exactly where I had been lying. My boots hit the wet concrete, and I rolled instantly into the deep, suffocating shadows of the rusted train cars. Over the screeching of metal and the roar of the engine, I heard Kendra scream. I risked a glance around the corner of a rusted wheel. She was scrambling on her hands and knees in the dirt, frantically scooping up the bundles of cash she had dropped. She didn't care that a truck had just tried to crush me. She didn't look for me. She just wanted her blood money. She threw herself into her car, slammed it into reverse, and sped away into the night. The black luxury SUV didn't stick around either. The man with the terrifying smile, the recruiter, climbed into the back seat and the vehicle peeled out of the lot, leaving the heavy pickup truck behind. 2 men stepped out of the truck. They were big, moving with the stiff, unnatural discipline of private military contractors. They held heavy tactical flashlights, the thick white beams slicing through the foggy air as they began sweeping the rows of shipping containers. I slowed my breathing until it was almost non-existent. This was my world now. They thought they had trapped a desperate, grieving civilian father. They forgot what I did for a living. I melted into the darkness between 2 decaying boxcars, letting the shadows swallow me entirely. "Check the gap," one of them barked. His voice echoed off the damp concrete. I picked up a loose rusted iron bolt from the tracks and tossed it over the first man's head. It clattered sharply against a metal drum 20 yards to his left. He spun toward the noise, his flashlight beam jerking away from my position. That was his final mistake. I closed the distance in 3 silent strides. I didn't strike him. I simply gripped his tactical vest from behind, swept his legs, and guided him quietly to the ground, applying precise, unbreakable pressure to his carotid artery. He thrashed for exactly 6 seconds before going completely limp. I dragged him under the box and tightly zip-tied his wrists to the heavy iron axle. The second man was getting nervous. "Blake," he called out, the false bravado cracking in his throat. "Blake, report." I stepped out of the shadows directly behind him. "Blake is sleeping," I whispered. He spun around, aggressively, swinging the heavy flashlight at my head. I slipped under the arc, drove my elbow hard into his ribs, and swept him to the cold pavement. Before he could shout, I had my knee pressed sharply into his chest, cutting off his air supply. "Who was the man in the SUV?" I demanded, my voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city traffic. He choked, his eyes wide with sudden terror. He realized he wasn't dealing with an angry husband. "Victor," he gasped. "His name is Victor. Where did he go?" The man shook his head violently. I pressed my knee down a fraction of an inch harder, watching the panic set in. He has a safe house," the man wheezed, his face turning purple. "Just outside the city limits. An old hunting cabin. He uses it before transporting. The new ones." The new ones. The words made my stomach turn. I thought of Violet's terrified little face alone in the dark with these monsters. I thought of Kendra counting her dirty money in the safety of her pristine living room. I pulled a zip tie from my pocket and secured the man to the nearby chain-link fence. I dug through his pockets and found his burner phone. There was a single text thread open. The last message from Victor read, "Clean up the husband. Meet me at the property." I left them tied in the cold and walked back to my truck. My hands were shaking, not from adrenaline, but from pure unadulterated rage. Victor thought he had sent a cleanup crew to dispose of a minor inconvenience. He thought he had outsmarted me. I drove toward the city limits. The burner phone sitting on the passenger seat, the legal wall detective Julian had warned me about, didn't matter out here in the dark. Warrants and court orders were useless against men who stole children in the middle of the night. It took an hour to reach the dirt road leading to Victor's safe house. I parked a mile away and moved through the dense woods on foot. The air smelled of wet pine needles and damp earth. Through the trees, I could see the faint yellow glow of a cabin window. I crept up to the side of the cabin and peered through the dirty glass. Victor was sitting at a small wooden table, casually pouring himself a drink. His dark coat was draped over a chair. He looked completely relaxed, waiting for his men to confirm I was dead. I reached for the doorknob, preparing to breach the room, rip his comfortable world apart, and force him to give me the exact coordinates of the main compound. But as my fingers brushed the cold metal of the handle, I heard a sound from the crawl space beneath the cabin floorboards. It was a soft, muffled sob, the unmistakable sound of a terrified child trying not to breathe. Was it Violet, or had I just stumbled into a much darker, wider nightmare? I froze with my hands still resting on the doorknob. The sound came again, faint, broken, trying to stay hidden, not random, not imagined, a child. Every instinct in my body split in two directions at once. One part of me wanted to breach the door immediately, take Victor down before he even had time to stand, and force everything out of him. End it fast, clean, controlled. The other part, the one that mattered more, told me if I made the wrong move, whoever was under that floor would pay for it. I slowly pulled my hand away from the door. Victor was calm inside. That meant he felt safe. That meant he didn't think there was any threat nearby. If I shattered that illusion too early, I would lose my advantage. I moved along the side of the cabin, lowering myself quietly to the damp ground. The wooden structure sat slightly elevated with a narrow crawl space underneath. Just enough room for storage, or for hiding something you didn't want anyone to find, or someone. I got flat on my stomach and angled my head toward the darkness beneath the cabin. At first, I saw nothing, just black space, dust, and wooden beams. Then I whispered, barely audible, "Hey." The sobbing stopped instantly. "Silence. I'm not here to hurt you," I said softer this time. "I'm looking for my daughter. Her name is Violet." A long pause, then a tiny voice shaking dry from crying. "They took her." My heart slammed so hard it almost broke my control. "Where?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. "Where did they take her?" She was here," the child whispered. "They kept her here yesterday, but she fought them. She wouldn't stop screaming for her dad." My throat tightened. That made him angry. The voice continued, trembling. "Victor said she was too aware, so they moved her back. Back to the main place, the church place, the chapel, Hollow Pine." I closed my eyes for a second. She had been here. I had missed her by hours. "Listen to me," I said carefully. "I'm going to get you out, but I need to know. Are there more kids here?" "No, just me now," the voice whispered. "The others, they rotate us." That word again, rotate, inventory, like objects. I felt something cold and dangerous settle deeper inside me. "Okay," I said. "Stay very quiet. I'm going to open this from the outside." "There's a latch," the child said quickly. "Near the back, hidden." I slid along the dirt, feeling the wood panels with my fingers until I found it. A small metal hook, almost invisible in the dark. I eased it open slowly, careful not to let it creak. The panel shifted. A pair of wide, terrified eyes stared back at me. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. Dirt on her face, wrists marked from tight restraints. And on her right wrist, no bracelet. Not Violet, but close enough to make my chest ache. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." I helped her out gently, keeping her low to the ground. "What's your name?" I asked. "Ruby," she said. "All right, Ruby. You're going to stay right here behind these trees. No matter what you hear, you don't move. Understand? She nodded quickly. I gave her my jacket. It swallowed her whole. Then I stood up. Now there was nothing left holding me back. I walked straight to the front door and opened it. No hesitation, no noise control, just presence. Victor looked up from his drink, mildly annoyed at first, like someone disturbed his evening for no good reason. Then he saw my face, and something shifted. Not fear recognition. You're persistent, he said calmly, setting the glass down. That's rare. I closed the door behind me. Where is she? I asked. Victor tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was an interesting problem. You're not asking the right question, he replied. The right question is, why are you still alive? I didn't answer. He smiled faintly. I saw you at the warehouse, he continued. Most men would have run. You stayed, adapted. That makes you useful. I'm not here to be useful, I said. I'm here for my daughter. Ah, he said softly. Violet, hearing her name from his mouth, almost broke my restraint. You moved her, I said. Back to Hollow Pine. Victor didn't deny it. She didn't fit, he said casually. Most children break quietly. They adjust. Accept guidance. Your daughter, he paused, almost impressed. She resists loudly. A strange mix of pride and rage twisted inside me. Then you know that means you picked the wrong child, I said. Victor chuckled under his breath. No, he said. It means we picked the wrong father. The room went still. You think this is about money? He continued. About desperate mothers and convenient transactions. That's just the surface. What we build, what Dominic builds, is far beyond that. I don't care. I cut in. Victor's eyes sharpened slightly. You should, he said, because right now you have two choices. You walk away, and your daughter is reconditioned properly, or you keep pushing. He leaned forward slightly, and she becomes an example. Silence filled the room, heavy, suffocating. Then I stepped closer. Here's the problem, I said quietly. You think I came here to negotiate. Victor didn't move, didn't reach for a weapon. He just watched me, curious, like he still thought he understood the situation. You've been watching me since the warehouse, I continued. Which means you already know something. He didn't respond. You know, I don't stop. A flicker, small but real. That was the first crack. I like you talk, I said. I let you feel in control. Another step closer. But you made one mistake. Victor's smile faded slightly. You kept a child here, I said. Alive. His eyes shifted just for a fraction of a second toward the floor. That was all I needed. In one motion, I flipped the heavy wooden table toward him and drove forward. The glass shattered, the drink spilling across the floor as Victor stumbled back, caught completely off guard for the first time. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him hard into the wall. Where is Dominic? Victor gritted his teeth, trying to hold composure, but it was slipping now. You're too late, he said. By the time you get there, I drove my fist into the wall beside his head, splintering the wood. Location. His breathing changed. Faster, less controlled. North Ridge. He snapped past Hollow Pine. Old logging road. You'll never make it inside. I held his gaze for a long second, measuring truth. Fear doesn't lie the same way words do, and right now, he was afraid. I let him go. He dropped slightly, catching himself against the wall. You should have stayed a ghost, Victor muttered. I stepped back toward the door. No, I said. I opened it. Cold air rushed in. You should have never touched my daughter. Outside, Ruby was exactly where I left her. Good. I picked up the burner phone from my pocket and looked at it. Julian wanted proof. Now I had something better. A location and a war waiting for me in the dark. But as I started moving toward the tree lane, Victor's voice echoed from inside the cabin. You really don't understand, do you? I stopped. You think you're walking into a rescue? He called out. A pause then. That place isn't a compound. Silence stretched. Then his final words followed me into the trees. It's where they break the ones who fight back. My grip tightened because Violet never stopped fighting. I didn't go straight to the ridge. Charging in blind would have been exactly what they expected now. Victor had already seen enough to understand I wasn't going to stop. That meant the moment I stepped back into Hollow Pine territory, they would be ready. I needed to shift the board. I drove Ruby to the nearest open gas station just before sunrise. She didn't speak much, just sat wrapped in my jacket, her small hands gripping the fabric like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Inside, I bought her water and something warm to eat. She watched me carefully, like she was still deciding whether I was real or just another part of the nightmare. "You're not going back there," I told her quietly. "Someone's going to come help you. Real help." "Police?" she asked, her voice small. I paused for a second. "Yeah," I said, "but the right kind." I stepped outside and pulled out Victor's burner phone. Then I called the only person who could turn this into something bigger than just me. Julian picked up on the third ring. "You said, 'Don't do anything stupid.'" I said. A pause. "What did you do?" Julian replied, already tense. "I found one of their transport points. I have a witness, a child, and I have a confirmed location tied to their movement network." Silence on the line. Then, "Where are you?" I gave him the location. He exhaled slowly. "Stay there. Don't move." "I'm coming." "No. I said you'll take too long." "Hunter, they're moving her again." I cut in. "You said you needed a crack in the armor. This is it." Another silence. He was thinking now fast. "If I come through official channels," Julian said, "they'll bury it. We both know that." "I know. So, whatever happens next." His voice dropped, more serious now. "I don't officially know you. That works for me." I ended the call. I went back inside, knelt in front of Ruby. "Someone's coming," I said. "His name is Julian. You tell him everything. Don't hold anything back. Understand?" She nodded. Then she hesitated. "You're going back, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away because she already knew. "Yeah," I said. Her grip tightened slightly on my sleeve. "They'll hurt her," she whispered. I met her eyes. "No," I said. "They won't." This time, I didn't say it to comfort her. I said it like a promise I was ready to bleed for. The road to the North Ridge wasn't marked on any map. Victor hadn't lied about that part. I found it by reading the land, in the way I was trained to. Tire impressions where there shouldn't be any. Broken branches at unnatural angles. The faint echo of repeated movement through silence. By the time I reached the old logging road, the sky had gone completely gray again. No sun, just a thick ceiling of clouds pressing down over the forest. Perfect cover. I parked far out and moved on foot. Every step forward felt different now. This wasn't tracking anymore. This was infiltration. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no insects, nothing. That kind of silence doesn't happen naturally. It's forced, controlled. Then I saw it. Not a compound. Victor had been right. It was bigger, much bigger. The ridge opened into a wide clearing carved deep into the forest. At the center stood the chapel-like structure I had seen before, but now I could see everything around it. Multiple buildings, perimeter paths, hidden watch points. This wasn't just a retreat. It was a system organized, layered, and guarded. I dropped low behind a fallen tree and studied the movement patterns. 2 patrols rotating every 6 minutes. One fixed position near the chapel entrance. Another near a lower structure built partially into the ground. That one caught my attention. Reinforced door. No windows. That wasn't for living. That was for breaking. My jaw tightened. Violet was in there. She had to be. I circled wide, staying downwind, using the terrain to stay invisible. Every movement was calculated. Every pause intentional. This was the part most people never understand. You don't rush into hell. You become part of the dark first. Then you control it. I reached the outer edge of the lower structure. Voices inside, muffled, one adult, one smaller. My pulse slowed instead of rising. Control. I shifted closer to the door, pressing just enough to catch fragments through the thick wood. Last chance. A man's voice said coldly. You either listen, or we make you silence. Then I want my dad. My entire world narrowed into that one sentence. Violet, weak, but still fighting, still holding on. Exactly like Victor said, too aware, too strong. I closed my eyes for half a second. That was all I allowed myself. Then I stepped back. 3 steps, measured, focused, and then I moved fast, silent, final. The guard near the lower entrance didn't even get a chance to react. I pulled him into the blind spot between structures and dropped him cleanly before he could make a sound. I caught his body before it hit the ground. No noise, no signal, nothing. I took his access key, walked to the reinforced door, and stopped because from inside, I heard Violet again. But this time, she wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. Her voice was shaking, but steady. If you touch me again, she said quietly, my dad will find you. Silence followed. Then a low laugh, cold, arrogant. They all say that, the man replied. I placed my hand on the door, grip tightening, because this time they were wrong. And as the lock clicked open, they were about to find out exactly why. The door opened without a sound. Cold air spilled out first. Damp, metallic, wrong. The kind of air that sits too long in places where pain gets buried instead of cleaned. I stepped inside. The room was dim, lit by a single overhead bulb that flickered just enough to make everything feel unstable. Concrete walls, no windows, chains bolted into the ground, a chair in the center, and Violet. Her hands were tied in front of her, not behind, like they wanted her to feel just enough freedom to think. She still had control. Her face was pale, streaked with dried tears, but her eyes locked onto mine instantly. She didn't scream, she didn't move, she just breathed out one word. Dad. Everything inside me tried to break right there, but I held it because the man standing behind her hadn't turned around yet. He was still facing the table beside him, adjusting something small and metallic in his hands. Fear is a process, he said calmly, like he was giving a lecture. It starts loud, then it becomes quiet, then it becomes obedience. I stepped forward. You skipped one step. He froze slowly. He turned. Mid-30s. Clean, controlled, not a guard, not muscle. This was someone who believed in what he was doing. That made him worse. And what step is that? He asked, studying me with curiosity instead of panic. I stopped a few feet away. The part where you realize you picked the wrong family. For a split second, confusion flickered across his face. That was enough. I closed the distance instantly. One hand grabbed his throat. The other slammed him hard into the concrete wall. The metallic object in his hand clattered to the floor. No noise, I said quietly, or you don't wake up. His breath hitched. His confidence cracked faster than the others. Good, behind me. I heard the slight shift of rope, Violet trying to move. Stay still, I said without turning. She listened. Always did. I tightened my grip slightly on the man's throat. How many inside? I asked. Why you don't understand, he started. I pressed harder. How many? 8, he choked, rotating. Some in the upper buildings. Dominic. At that name, his eyes changed. Respect, fear, loyalty, all mixed together. He's in the chapel, the man said quickly. Preparing. I didn't let him finish. I cut him off with a sharp strike that dropped him instantly. Silence returned. I turned, and finally I dropped to my knees in front of Violet. Up close, the damage was worse. Red marks around her wrists, dirt on her face, a faint bruise near her cheek. But she was here. She was alive. My hands were steady as I untied the rope. You okay? I asked quietly. She nodded, but her lips trembled. I knew you'd come, she whispered. That almost broke me. Almost. I pulled her into me, holding her just tight enough for her to feel it, but not enough to scare her. I'm here, I said. I've got you. She buried her face into my shoulder for 1 second, then she pulled back. Dad, she said softly. I looked at her. There are more kids. I nodded slowly. I know they're not all here, she added quickly. Some are upstairs, some in the other buildings. They move them. Her voice started shaking again, but she forced herself to keep talking. There's a room in the chapel, she said. That's where they take the ones who don't listen, Dominic. My focus sharpened again instantly. We're getting you out first, I said. She shook her head. No, she said firm. Stronger than any child should have to be. They'll just take more if we leave, she added. You said that once. Remember, bad people don't stop unless someone makes them. I stared at her for a second. 7 years old, and she understood it better than most adults. I exhaled slowly. You're right, I said. Then I stood up fast, decided. I pulled the unconscious man into the corner, securing him tightly. Then I looked back at Violet. You stay right behind me, I said. No matter what happens, you don't run, you don't stop, you stay with me. She nodded. No hesitation. I moved to the door, cracked it open slightly, scanning the outside. Still clear for now, I stepped out, Violet right behind me, her small hand gripping the back of my jacket. We moved low along the structure, staying in shadows. The system was still running. They didn't know yet, but they would soon. As we reached the edge of the clearing, I saw a movement near the chapel. More people gathering. Not guards, followers. Something was about to happen. Dad, Violet whispered. I see it. This wasn't random. This was scheduled, planned, which meant Dominic was about to make a move, and if he was preparing something inside that chapel, then this wasn't just about control anymore. This was escalation. I looked down at Violet, then back at the chapel, then at the surrounding buildings. Decision point. Leave now and survive or stay. And in this completely, before I could move, a loud bell rang across the entire compound, deep echoing. Final. Every head turned toward the chapel. Every movement stopped. And then from the entrance, Dominic stepped out, calm, composed, and looking directly at me like he had been expecting this moment all along. The entire clearing went still, not quiet, controlled. Every person standing near the chapel shifted their attention in the same direction toward him, toward Dominic, and then toward me. He didn't look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. No tension in his shoulders, no sudden movement, no signal to the guards, just calm, like this moment had already happened in his mind 100 times. "Hunter," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing without effort. "You made it further than most." My grip tightened slightly around Violet's hand behind me. He knew my name. "That meant one thing, Kindra. You've been busy," Dominic continued, stepping down slowly from the chapel entrance. "You found Victor. You found the trail. You even made it inside my lower facility." He smiled faintly, impressive. I didn't respond, didn't move, didn't give him anything, because men like him feed on reaction. "You're here for your daughter," he said as if stating something obvious. "That part is simple." His eyes shifted slightly past me, locking onto Violet. "And there you are," he added softly. I stepped just enough to block his line of sight. That made him smile a little more. "Protective," he said. "Good, that's useful." "I'm not here to talk," I said. "Of course you are," Dominic replied calmly. "Everyone is. You just don't realize it yet." A few of the men around the clearing shifted subtly now, not rushing, not aggressive, positioning, closing space. I clocked all of it. Angles, distances, timing, still manageable, but tightening. "You walked into my system," Dominic said, alone. "That tells me two things." He raised a finger slightly. "One, you don't trust the law." A second finger. "Two, you believe you can finish this yourself." I said nothing because both were true. "And that belief," he continued, stepping closer, "is exactly what I build everything on." That was new, not what I expected. "You think this is about control?" he said. "About money. About desperate people making ugly choices." He shook his head slowly. "No, that's just the entry point." He stopped about 20 feet away now. Close enough to see clearly. Not close enough to touch. "This is about selection," he said quietly. "Pressure reveals truth. Most people break. They submit. They reshape." His eyes flicked again toward Violet. "But some don't." My jaw tightened. "And those are the ones worth keeping," he finished. Silence stretched between us, heavy measured. "You're not taking anyone," I said. Dominic tilted his head slightly. "I already have," he replied. Then he clapped once. Sharp echoing, and everything changed from the edges of the clearing. Movement, not guards. Children, 5 of them brought forward slowly by 2 handlers, small, silent, empty-eyed, except one, a boy staring straight at me. Not broken, not gone, just waiting. "You see," Dominic said softly, "different outcomes, same process." My focus snapped back to him. "This ends now," I said. Dominic studied me for a long second, then he smiled. "No," he said, and nodded slightly. That was the signal. Everything moved at once. The handlers pulled the children back. The guards shifted forward fast, coordinated, but I was already moving. I pushed Violet behind the thick trunk of a fallen tree at the edge of the clearing. "Stay down," I said sharply. Then I turned and stepped into them. The first man came from the left, too fast for a normal target, too slow for me. I redirected his momentum and dropped him before his second step landed. The second tried to flank. I saw it coming before he committed. Adjusted, removed him from the fight in one motion. No wasted movement, no hesitation. This wasn't chaos, this was control. But there were more, and they weren't stopping. Behind them, Dominic didn't move, didn't react. He just watched, studying, learning. That made this worse, because this wasn't just defense for him, this was evaluation. I broke through the first line and created space. Enough. Not much, but enough. I reached back, grabbed Violet's hand. "We're moving," I said. We cut right toward the tree line. Not the entrance, not the road. Unpredictable. That's how you survive systems like this. Behind us, I heard Dominic's voice again, not loud, but clear. Don't stop them. Everything paused for half a second. Even the guards. That was wrong. That was very wrong. I didn't slow down, didn't question it. Just moved fast deep into the trees, branches snapping under controlled steps. Breathing steady, Violet keeping pace as best as she could. We didn't stop until the compound disappeared behind us. Only then I slowed, turned, listened. Nothing. No pursuit, no sound. Just forest and silence. That's when it hit me. He let us go, not because he couldn't stop us, because he chose not to. Violet tightened her grip on my hand. "Dad," she whispered, "why aren't they coming?" I looked back toward the ridge, mind already running through every possibility, every angle, every mistake. And then I understood this wasn't over. This wasn't even the real fight. This was positioning, and Dominic had just made his move first. We didn't stop moving until the forest started thinning, and the ground leveled out near the old service road. Only then did I finally slow down enough to think clearly. Dominic letting us go wasn't mercy. It was strategy. Men like him don't lose control. They expanded. I crouched down in front of Violet, checking her wrists again. The marks were worse now that the adrenaline had faded. She winced slightly but didn't complain. "You did good," I said quietly. She shook her head. "They're still there." I held her gaze. "I know. And that was the problem. I had what I came for. My daughter was alive, safe for now. Any normal father would leave, drive as far as possible, disappear, protect what's left. But this wasn't normal anymore, because Dominic didn't just let us go. He showed me something. Those kids, that system, that confidence. He wasn't afraid of being exposed, which meant one thing. He believed he couldn't be touched. I stood up slowly and looked down the empty road, stretching into the distance. Then I pulled out Victor's burner phone again. One message, still open. "Meet me at the property." I exhaled, then dialed Julian. He picked up immediately. "Tell me you're alive," he said. "I am," I replied. "And I have my daughter." A pause, then a sharp breath of relief. "Good. Then get out right now. We'll handle the rest." "No," I said. "Silence. You don't understand," I continued. "This isn't just a cult. It's structured, rotational, layered. They're moving kids through multiple locations, training them, breaking them. I know what they are," Julian said. "But now we have a witness. That's enough to start building a case." "It's not enough," I cut in. "By the time your case moves, they'll be gone." Another pause. "Longer this time." "What are you saying?" he asked. I looked at Violet, then back toward the forest. "I'm saying you wanted proof," I said. "I can give you everything." Julian didn't respond right away, because he already knew where this was going. "You go back in there," he said slowly. "You're on your own." I already was. "That's not the point," he snapped. "This time it's different. Now they know you. Now they're ready." "Good," I said. "That doesn't make it easier." "No," I replied. "It makes it final." Silence again, then a shift in his tone. Less resistance, more calculation. "What do you need?" he asked. That was it. That was the crack. "Everything you couldn't get legally," I said. "Property records, financial leaks, names tied to the Lantern Path, judges, lawyers, anyone protecting them." "That's not clean," Julian said. "Neither is this." A long breath on the other end. "I can't send it officially. I don't need official." Another pause. "Then I'll text you what I have," he said quietly. "But Hunter, yeah, if you do this, you don't get to stop halfway." I looked down at Violet again, her small hand still holding onto my sleeve, trusting, unquestioning. "I know," I said. The line went dead. A second later my phone buzzed. Files, names, locations, everything Julian couldn't say out loud. I scanned through it quickly, and then one name stood out, a legal representative tied to multiple blocked warrants against Hollow Pine. Preston Hale, same name listed under the Lantern Path Foundation, and a secondary residence. Not far, too close. I looked up slowly. Dominic didn't just build a system in the woods. He built protection in the city. That was the real structure. And now I could see it. I turned back to Violet. "Change of plan," I said. Her expression shifted slightly. Not fear, understanding. "We're not running?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. Then I crouched down in front of her. "You're going somewhere safe," I added, "with someone I trust. What about you?" I didn't answer immediately because she already knew. "You're going back," she said. I nodded. She swallowed, then stepped forward and hugged me tightly. This time I held her longer just for a second because after this nothing would be the same. I pulled back and looked at her. "You remember what I told you?" I asked. She nodded. "Stay strong." I gave a small nod. "Always." An hour later, I handed Violet over to Julian at a secure location just outside the city. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He just looked at me and understood. "You've got one shot at this," he said. "That's all I need." I turned and walked away before it got harder. Back into the truck, back into the dark. But this time, I wasn't going to the woods. I was going somewhere Dominic didn't expect: the city. Because systems like his don't fall from the outside. They collapse from the inside. And if Preston Hale was the legal shield protecting everything, then that's exactly where I was going to start. But as I drove toward the address on Julian's file, one thought kept repeating in my head. Dominic, let me take Violet, which means he wanted me to make this move. And if that was true, then I wasn't just hunting him anymore. I was walking exactly where he wanted me to go. Preston Hale's house didn't look like the kind of place that protected monsters. Quiet street, clean sidewalks, warm lights behind expensive glass. The kind of neighborhood where people trusted locks more than instincts. I parked 2 houses down and stayed in the truck for a full minute watching. No visible security, no patrol, no cameras on the outside corners. Too clean. Men like Preston didn't rely on obvious protection. They relied on the assumption that no one would ever come for them. That assumption was about to break. I stepped out and walked straight to the front door. No hesitation, no stealth, just presence. I knocked once. Firm, controlled. Footsteps inside, then the door opened. Preston Hale looked exactly like the kind of man who could bury crimes behind paperwork and sleep perfectly fine at night. Mid-50s, clean suit, calm eyes, annoyed more than concerned. "Yes," he said. "I need 5 minutes," I replied. "I don't think you." I pushed the door open and stepped inside before he could finish. He stumbled back slightly, more shocked by the audacity than the action. "You can't just walk into I can," I said calmly, closing the door behind me, "because you already know who I am." That stopped him. Not fully, but enough. His eyes studied me now, carefully. "Hunter," he said after a moment. "Confirmation." "Good." "You're connected to the Lantern Path," I said. "I represent multiple organizations," he replied smoothly. "If this is about some misunderstanding, it's not." He sighed. Adjusting his sleeve like this was just another inconvenient conversation. "You're emotional," he said. "That's understandable, but you're also making a mistake." "No," I said, "you are a flicker, small but real. I just came from the ridge," I continued. "I've seen what you're protecting. I've seen the kids." Preston's expression didn't collapse, but it changed, less dismissive, more calculating. "You shouldn't have gone there," he said quietly. "And you shouldn't have signed off on it." Silence, heavy, measured. Then he walked past me slowly into the living room, not running, not panicking, just accepting the conversation. "That place exists within legal boundaries," he said. "Every transfer, every guardian agreement, every document signed, they're buying children." I said, "They're reallocating responsibility," he corrected calmly. That word almost made me lose control. "Almost. You hide it behind language," I said. "That doesn't change what it is." "It changes everything," Preston replied. "Because language is what the law listens to." He turned to face me fully. "Now you think you've discovered something dark," he continued. "But systems like this exist because people allow them to. People like you." "Yes," he said. No denial, no hesitation. That honesty hit harder than any lie. "You ever wonder why your wife signed those papers so easily?" he added. My jaw tightened. "That wasn't desperation," Preston said. "That was design." Something cold moved through me. "What does that mean?" I asked. Preston watched me closely. "Then you think Kendra was just a weak link?" He said, "A selfish mother who made a bad decision." A pause. "She wasn't." Silence filled the room. Slow, heavy. "She was selected," Preston said. My focus sharpened instantly. "For what?" He didn't answer right away because he knew exactly what this moment meant. "Then for access," he said. Everything inside me went still. "She was approached months before you deployed," Preston continued. "Financial pressure was just the entry point. They studied her, built trust, created dependency. That doesn't explain. It explains everything," he cut in, "because she didn't just give them your daughter." A pause long enough to feel it. "She gave them you." The room felt smaller, tighter. What are you talking about? I asked. Preston stepped closer. Not aggressive, just certain. You're not random hunter, he said. You're trained, disciplined, predictable under pressure. That makes you valuable. No, I said, but it didn't sound solid anymore. They knew you would come back, Preston continued. They knew you wouldn't trust the system. They knew you'd track, infiltrate, adapt. Each word landed heavier than the last. You weren't reacting to this situation, he said quietly. You were part of it. Silence. Then a memory hit me hard. Victor smiling at the warehouse. Dominic watching instead of stopping me. Letting me leave. Letting me move. Guiding the path without ever touching it. This wasn't chaos, it was structure, and I had been moving exactly where they wanted me. Why? I asked. Preston's expression didn't change. Because men like you don't break easily, he said. You evolve. A chill ran down my spine, and if they can't break you, he added softly, they use you. The room went completely silent, because suddenly everything made sense, too much sense, and that's when I realized this wasn't just about saving Violet anymore. This was something bigger, something planned, something I had just stepped directly into, without even realizing it. Everything slowed down after that, not outside, inside me, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. I stood there in Preston's living room, replaying every step I had taken since I walked into that empty house. Every decision, every win, every moment I thought I was ahead. I wasn't. I was guided carefully, precisely. Kendra, Victor, Dominic, none of them tried to stop me. They shaped me, tested me, moved me like I was part of the system they built. Preston watched my silence like a man watching a lock finally click open. You see it now? He said quietly. I lifted my eyes to him. Yeah, I said, I do. And for the first time I smiled. Small, controlled. Because there was one thing Preston didn't understand. Patterns don't just trap you, they expose themselves. You made one mistake, I said. His expression didn't change. Which one? He asked. You told me the truth. That was the moment something shifted, subtle but real. People like you, I continued. You believe control comes from information. I stepped closer. But control actually comes from timing. Preston's eyes narrowed slightly. You think I walked in here to understand your system? I asked. No answer. Julian, I said. That name landed harder than anything else I'd said. Everything you just told me, I continued. It's already recorded. Silence. Then, for the first time, Preston moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but no longer calm. You're lying, he said. I didn't respond, because I didn't need to. The truth was already doing the work on its own. I didn't come here alone, I added. That part wasn't entirely true, but it didn't matter, because doubt speaks louder than facts ever could. Preston turned slightly toward the hallway, calculating exit routes, weighing his options. Too late. Sirens cut through the night, distant at first, but closing fast. And this time, they weren't stopping. Preston looked back at me, really looked, and finally, he understood. You're not part of the system, he said slowly. No, I replied. I held his gaze. I'm the part that ends it. The raid wasn't quiet. It wasn't clean. It wasn't buried behind paperwork and delays. Julian moved fast, faster than the system could shut him down. Preston's name pried open doors that had stayed locked for years. Warrants, financial trails, hidden properties, all of it collapsed at once. By the time they hit Hollow Pine, Dominic was still there. That turned out to be his final mistake. He believed in control too much to run. They found the children, all of them broken in different ways, but alive. That was what mattered. Victor tried to disappear. He didn't make it far. And Kendra, she didn't run. She didn't fight. She simply sat in that same living room, holding a glass of wine, as though none of it were real. When they finally took her away, she didn't even look at me, and somehow, that hurt less than everything else combined. Weeks passed. Then months. The system didn't vanish overnight, but it cracked badly. Public exposure, trials, names finally coming out into the light. People who believed they were untouchable were finally seen for who they truly were. Julian kept his word. He never let it get buried. And me? I went back to the only place that ever truly mattered, home. Violet sat on the floor rebuilding her stuffed rabbit, the same one. Stitched back together, not perfect, but still there, still hers. I leaned against the doorway, watching her for a moment. You're getting better at that, I said. She smiled slightly, I don't want a new one, she replied. This one stayed. I nodded. Yeah, I said. It did. She looked up at me. Are they gone? She asked. Kids don't ask for details. They ask for truth. Yeah, I said after a second. They're gone. Not completely. Not forever. But enough. Enough for her to sleep without fear. Enough for her to be a kid again. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. That was all she needed. She went back to fixing the rabbit, and I stayed there, watching, quiet, present, because in the end, that's what all of this had been for. Not revenge, not destruction, not proving anything to anyone. Just her, safe, alive, free. But sometimes, late at night, when everything grows quiet again, I still think about what Preston said, about systems, about patterns, about people who believe they're the ones in control. Because the truth is, there will always be another version of them out there somewhere, building something in the dark, and the real question was never whether they exist. It's who stops them before it's too late.
चलो चलो जल्दी जल्दी।
और जोर से
हाँ जी, जो
वीडियो बना ले।
हाँ वीडियो बना रहा हूँ।
और जोर से करो। ओके
हाँ और ज़रा जोर।
Dia tersalah juga. Hah? Iya, sama tau deh. और जोर से
हाँ जी, जो
वीडियो बना ले।
हाँ वीडियो बना रहा हूँ।
और जोर से करो। ओके
हाँ और ज़रा जोर।
Dia tersalah juga. Hah?